Hey everyone. So let's talk about AI anxiety. It's everywhere, right? Well, what if the key to dealing with it isn't some futuristic idea, but something ancient? That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to break down the main argument from a really interesting new book by Victoria Carrington that lays out a whole theological framework for thinking about technology.
I mean, this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds, right? Even if you don't say it out loud just like that. AI is just moving so fast, and the changes are so huge. It kind of feels like we've built something that's just out of control. Like, has this thing finally gotten away from us? Maybe even gotten away from God?
But here's where Carrington's book just hits the brakes. She says, nope, that fear is totally misplaced, and her solution isn't some brand new philosophy for our crazy modern age. Instead, she says we need to go back, way back, to a really old understanding of who God is and how he's always worked in history. Okay, so let's get into the first part, a world beyond control. This is all about digging into that core anxiety of the AI age that the author is really trying to tackle.
So this question is really the heartbeat of her whole argument. The fear that AI is such a game changer that maybe, just maybe, it actually caught God by surprise. But her entire framework is basically built to prove why, from her point of view, that's just not possible, not even close.
All right, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, that brings us to our second section, the God who never sleeps. And this whole theological framework she builds, it all comes down to one central idea.
This verse right here, this is basically the foundation for everything she says. Think about it. This was originally a song for people on a really dangerous trip, a promise that they were being watched over constantly. What Carrington does is she takes that ancient promise of protection and applies it directly to our journey, this kind of scary, uncertain technological road we're all on.
And this contrast she draws is absolutely crucial. You see, the stories of other false gods often describe them as, getting tired or distracted or just not paying attention. But the God of the Bible, he's described as always awake, always in charge, always there. And the implication is huge, right? If God never sleeps, then there's no way he could have missed the invention of AI. He was just as present in those Silicon Valley labs as he was anywhere else in history. And that leads us straight into this big theological idea called providence. All it really means is the belief that history isn't just a bunch of random stuff happening. From this perspective, God is actually steering the ship, guiding everything. And not just the big stuff like wars and empires, but also the timing of when our inventions show up.
So what does that mean for AI? Well, it means it's not some rogue code that escaped the system. It's not an accident that crashed the party. And this framework is just another thread in this giant tapestry of history that God has been weaving all along. So its arrival wasn't a surprise. It was foreseen, and it's actually part of the design.
And the author brings in verses like this one from Isaiah to really drive home the sheer scale we're talking about. See, she's pushing back against what she calls a small God idea, this image of a God who could actually be intimidated or outrun by something humans create. This verse, though, it paints a picture of a God who is so ridiculously big that even our most mind-blowing achievements look, well, like grasshoppers.
Okay, on to our third section, lessons from past inventions. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the author makes the case that this feeling we have about AI, this intense fear, it's not new at all. In fact, she says we've seen this movie before. It's a pattern. She pulls out 3 big examples from history. You've got the telegraph, which basically obliterated distance. You've got the Industrial Revolution, which completely rewired society. And then, of course, nuclear technology, which gave us this terrifying world-ending power. And with every single one of them, people had the exact same reaction. Okay, this time we've gone too far.
And this first telegraph message, it's just a perfect snapshot of that moment. It has all the awe, but it also shows how people immediately saw it through a religious lens. On one hand, you had Samuel Morse himself, who saw it as this incredible thing God had done. But on the other hand, a lot of people were scared. They thought humans were messing with the fundamental rules of time and space that God had created.
And this is the pattern she lays out so clearly. With every new invention, you get this initial wave of fear. We're playing God, or this is going to destroy our humanity. But then, what happens? She argues that in every case, people of faith eventually figured out how to use that same technology for things they believed were good. Using the telegraph to organize missions, or using the printing press to get Bibles into everyone's hands. The pattern is always the same. Fear comes first, but it eventually turns into faithful use.
Okay, so we've talked theology, we've talked history, but what does any of this actually mean for us, right now, with AI? That's what this last section is all about, a plan for AI. We're moving from the what to the so what, the practical takeaways that the author offers.
The foundational idea here is really simple. Tools are neutral. A hammer isn't good or evil, right? You can build a house with it, or you can break a window. The author says technology is the same way. Whether it's a printing press or a sophisticated AI, it's not born good or evil. It's just an amplifier. It takes whatever is in the heart of the user and makes it bigger, whether that's truth or lies, building people up or tearing them down.
So that core idea leads to these three very clear takeaways she presents. Number one, stop being afraid of AI like it's some cosmic accident that slipped past God. Number two, don't just write it off as being inherently evil or demonic. And number three, and this is the big one, instead of just fearing it or rejecting it, the real challenge is to lean in and actively figure out how to use this incredibly powerful new tool for good, or as she puts it, for God's glory.
And that really brings us to the final, challenging question the book leaves you with. If you actually start to see AI this way, not as a random accident, but as something that arrived right on schedule in a divine plan, what does that actually change for you? Well, from this perspective, it changes everything. It's a call to move from just being anxious and worried to being active and faithful and wise in how we engage with the world we actually live in.